this very rapidly, very rapidly change. So the first change we already know very well was the key innovation on containerization. And everybody knows that due to the containerization, the whole logistics world, the whole maritime business has changed. Here you can see the first container arriving in the city of Bremen 55 years ago. And the consequences are dramatically, because using the container, everybody knows that then the efficiency in the supply chain increases very enormously. So this was the key innovation in the past. And nowadays we think about the key innovation today. And the key innovation today is digitalization. That means the digital transformation is the process of implementing digital technologies, digitizing organizational processes, and developing new digital business models. And what are the consequences of this digital transformation? The consequences could be that finally we have an object-to-object communication, that we do not need any more dispatchers in the headquarters or in the branch offices of the companies, but the decisions are done by the objects themselves. So maybe in future, the pallet discuss directly with the container whether or not there's still some space inside the container and whether the container will be delivered to, let's say, Sri Lanka or any other location in the world. But the communication is realized object to object, so from the container to the pallet, from the pallet to the container, or maybe from the container to the truck, or from the container to the ship. So we do not need any more dispatchers in the companies. Maybe not next year, maybe not the year after next year, but maybe in 20 years. So maybe there we have some new kind of communication between all these different objects. And all of these developments are related to Internet of Things, to the use of big data. So the big data are used to analyze decision patterns, to analyze and to come to better decisions, to use cloud computing and cyber physical systems. But the major message is that object-to-object communication will change the world. And this is realized, or this is also called under the headline of Industry 4.0, or somebody also calls it Logistics 4.0, Seaport, Shipping, Supply Chain, Procurement 4.0, Trade 4.0. The message is that we use cyber physical systems to communicate between the cloud and the real world, and that we have object-to-object communication used within Internet of Things, and that there's a network of objects communicating by themselves and make decisions by themselves. So it's, of course, more than only using of computers or emails or scanning of documents, and it's more than automation, because the decisions are shifted to the cloud. Somebody also calls it cloud logistics, because we can use the cloud as the base for the decision, for the instruments, for the software. And as soon as we need some decisions, we can call the cloud, and then the decisions are provided. And all of this is realized by so-called cyber physical systems, which are technologies like sensors or actuators, which can be used for the communication between Internet and the real world and the operations in the real world. And using these new cyber physical systems, these new digital service innovations, the digital transformation, we come to different organizational processes. We do not have any more hierarchical processes top down from the headquarter to, or from the tower to the operational level. We have self-regulating processes, self-controlled processes. We do not have any more clock coordination, but we have a coordination on demand. And we will come from a conventional capacity-oriented business assessment to an opportunity-oriented assessment. So no more looking only to the past or the present situation, but also looking to the future and to focus on opportunities in assessing the options for the assignment of different objects to other objects. And in line with this, at least in Germany and in Europe, there are a lot of supporting activities from the ministries to go this way towards digital transformation and digital service innovations. The first step towards this digital transformation are digital twins, and I guess that the next speaker, my friend and colleague Holger Schütt, also will focus on this topic of digital twins and on simulation and emulation. So the first topic, the first step towards this digital transformation is the use of digital twins and to implement the decisions within the twin, and then to communicate between the virtual system on the computer, in the internet, and the real world system in the port. In line with this, we should mention that, of course, most of the decisions are assignment problems. Most of the decisions are problems which can be solved by combinatorial optimization. And due to this, as soon as the software is available, we can shift the decision to the software, and we can use the software on demand, logistics on demand. We can use the software on demand, and due to this, we can shift it to a software which is saved anywhere in the internet and then can be called as soon as a decision is necessary. So on the one hand side, we have the simulation and the emulation, and on the other side, the real world, and they are connected via the philosophy, via the policy of digital twins. And as I've said, this all can be realized due to the fact that we have a lot of assignment problems. The assignment of or allocation problems, the assignment of containers to ports according to special bottleneck conditions, the assignment of services to selected ports, the assignment of terminal operations to vessels, the assignment of containers to hinterland connections. All of these assignments, allocations, are combinatorial problems, and for these combinatorial problems, methods, instruments in operations research are already available and can be provided for the solution and for decision support. And in line with this, there are already today some digital service innovations available, and also in future there will come additional digital service innovations. So some of these innovations are yard and container lot management, ship announcement and terminal preparation, the forecast of the expected time of arrival and all of these topics, the gate drive-through management, flexible and conditional supply chain management. Conditional supply chain management, because it's important to check a little bit about the necessity to shift maybe the transshipment of containers from one port to another port according to the conditions inside the containers. So this all can be provided as soon as the data is available and as soon as we can a little bit analyze using big data analysis the conditions of the containers on the board of the container ships, or for example, empty container management. So the lessons learned is so that there are assignment problems, and that for these assignment problems, operations research methods and instruments are already available, and this supports the provision of these decision support tools via the internet and the implementation of cloud logistics. Due to this, also the business models will change step by step. So 40 years ago, we have discussed about 1PL. So the cargo owners, the manufacturers, the retailers have organized the transportation logistics by themselves. Nowadays, we discuss about 3PL, which is contract logistics, which is a logistics service provider with already available assets. And we discuss about 4PL companies without any assets, but with a lot of knowledge about companies who have available these assets. So there are already companies like 4PLs for implementation of supply chain management. And the next step is then to use big data, as for example realized by Amazon, and to shift from supply chain management to demand chain management, and to realize a big data-driven logistics provider, which I call 5PL. And then the next step, not only using the big data available, but then to shift the decision to the cloud. The next step would be 6PL, which is cloud logistics, in my opinion, is the digital logistics provider. As I've already said, maybe not next year or the year after next year, but maybe in 10, 15 years, these kind of digital logistics provider at least extend the availability of logistics service providers in the world. And I think they will be the winners of the game, because they have the methodology available, the instruments available, the software available, and they have data access. And as soon as they have access to the data, they are very powerful logistics service providers. So the digital logistics service providers in the future. And the way towards these digital logistics companies is already foreseen, is already, so the first steps are already done. Now there's one port in the world, there are several ports in the world which goes this way, for example, in South Korea, in Busan, in Dubai, in Jebel Ali in Dubai, the fourth terminal, or the most well-known, I guess, is the Next Generation Port 2030. In Singapore, a new port, the laying of the foundation stone was already in 2019, and the port should have a capacity finally of 65 million TEUs, so which is really a very huge number. But all of these, as outlined maybe in this nice picture, as outlined in this picture, they have foreseen that all, or let's say nearly all of the processes are automated, are controlled by the cloud, and are realized by object-to-object communication. So you see automated K cranes, you see automated guided vehicles. Of course, as you know, in Hamburg, we already have these automated guided vehicles since several years, I guess since 15 or 20 years or something like this. But the innovation now is that we have object-to-object communication between these automated guided vehicles and between the containers and the cranes, and no more the direct contact to the tower or to the headquarter. We also have e-navigation and autonomous ship, and all of these developments which are discussed in line with Port 4.0, the port of the future, the next generation port 2030. This discussion is not only going on since several years in Singapore or in Asia, it's also going on in Europe, in Antwerp, in Rotterdam, and of course also in Hamburg and in Bremerhaven. As you can see here in Europe, the consultation period for this e-maritime initiative was already 10 years ago in 2010. And still since this time, the people discuss on how to realize it. And here you can see two examples. One example is the concept of the gate drive-through option for the trucks, so without any stopping. So the truck is allowed to go through the gate, and the information is controlled by intelligent sensors, which use the data for directing the truck to the right container place, to the right container. And the other option is the interface between the different partners, between the different institutions from A to B, for example, from China to Europe, and to realize a most efficient and reliable information chain for this information transportation. And this is directly related with the present activity of Maersk on the use of blockchain for the realization of a reliable information chain from China, or from Europe to China, and from China to Europe, and other relations. So these discussions are already existing since, let's say, 10 years, at least 10 years. And the question is on how to implement it in the different ports, and on how to not only to implement the technology, but on how to adapt, on how to find new organizational processes which are able to use these technology in an efficient way. Here you have what I've already mentioned, the blockchain technology and the smart contracts, the activity of Maersk in cooperation with IBM, which is the name of this initiative. Everybody knows about it, is trade lands. But the same is done with COSCO Shipping, China Ocean Shipping Company, and Alibaba. They are also realizing, or trying to realize, a blockchain technology link of the data pipeline between China and other continents, between China and Europe, to realize reliable and efficient and economic information transfer from the origin to the final customer. And of course, this can be done by digitalization, by digital transformation of the different processes. So the future already has begun. So there's a very interesting booklet of our German federal ministry on transportation and digital infrastructure. So if you are interested in the vision of our German ministry on transport and digital infrastructure, you can have a look inside this interesting brochure. It's not the scientific paper, but it summarizes all of the scientific activities out of the present research activities in this field, which is called Logistics 2030 Innovation Program. And it summarizes a little bit all of the different activities. And it also focuses not only on industrial logistics, but also port logistics and ocean shipping. So everybody knows about the Hyperloop. Yeah, so we already have some experiments on the Hyperloop also in Europe. So new kind of very fast transportation. I'm not sure whether it can be realized in Europe because of the density of the different industrial areas, but let's wait and see. We also have, in the meantime, the automatic coupling of wagons in the railway sectors. So also here the development is going on. We already have, since the summer this year, a very successful project in the port of Hamburg with self-controlled trucks, organizing the container transfer from one terminal in Hamburg to another terminal in Hamburg, or at least on a short distance, but in the real world, so on real existing highways, on real existing streets, and not only on some computer pages or something like this, but in the real world. So they have finalized or have first very successful results since summer this year, and it's an activity of the Port of Hamburg. And we already have some self-controlled, automated, and also fully battery-powered ships. So on the left, you can see the first ship for a shipping company in Norway, in Oslo. So the future has already begun. And to realize this future, people will propose to implement some silicon logistics ecosystems. So our friends from the Institute of Material Flow and Logistics, the Fraunhofer Institute in Dortmund, call it Silicon Economy Logistics Ecosystem. My colleague, Professor Ten Hompel, call it like this. I call it usually digital landlord model, because I want to compare it with the typical philosophy in Europe on realize ports. And this type of model of port realization is called the landlord model. So the infrastructure is organized by the public sector, by the regional state level, and the suprastructure is organized by the business companies, by the private sector. And we also can realize this framework for digital transformation in such a way that we realize a digital suprastructure, which is and the digital infrastructure. And the digital infrastructure is the base for the communication platform. It's more than only 5G. It's the web-based platform, the digital web-based platform, which should be neutral. So to allow everybody, to allow every institution to use this platform, non-discriminatory, decentralized, across different locations. And this platform should have the character of an essential facility. So to implement digital transformation, we should have some standards on how to implement these kind of platforms. Why is it necessary to have these standards? Because otherwise, maybe Rotterdam do other things than Hamburg, and Hamburg do other things than Singapore, and Singapore develops another way, and like than in Colombo. So we need some kind of interfaces which are able to connect these web-based platforms, the digital infrastructure, which is provided usually by the state sector, by the regional state sector. And the digital suprastructure can use this web-based platform and implement the digital services innovations using the web-based platform. And this can be realized by private companies, by private sector offers, and maybe as open innovation or something like this. So all the digital service innovations can be implemented or can be developed by the private companies, and they can hopefully use a common web-based platform provided by the regional government, by the regional state, or at least on an international or European or worldwide level. I hope that the International Maritime Organization is discussing in this direction. And if we have this platform, of course, we can use or we can rethink the different operations in line with port management and maritime logistics. For example, we can discuss the redirection and reassignment of vessels according to the bottleneck situations between the different ports. So at least from a methodological point, it's possible to do it. The question is whether it's successful from a practical point and from a political point of view. So if we focus on the ports of Wilhelmshaven, Bremerhaven, and Hamburg, and according to the bottleneck situations in these different ports, maybe there could be a decision to redesign and redirect the vessels and to come to more efficient final supply chains to the hinterland. But this depends on the availability of data, and this depends on the port policy in these different ports. Also, it can realize some kind of bottleneck planning between the terminals, and I can shift the control of the processes from the terminal to the ship. Why in future it's not possible to organize all of the container transshipment, all of the questions on how to store the containers on the container yard by the ship and no more by the terminal. So you see, we have to rethink a little bit the already existing system and think what would happen if we change it. Yeah, what would happen if we change it? You remember that 30, 40 years ago, there was also such kind of shift. So Aichi Ono has invented the pull principle. Yeah, up to this time at Toyota, we also have the push principle in the supply chain. And then he has changed the point of view on the whole supply chain and has introduced the pull principle. And I want to motivate and initiate some similar kind of rethinking of all the operations in the port sector and in maritime logistics, maybe to come to more efficient operations than up to now. And one option could be the bottleneck planning between terminals and the shift of control from the terminal to the ship. Maybe it could be possible. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether it works. And we also can realize some kind of gate drive-through concept or the sharing-based yard and container storage and stacking management and all of these different options. And finally, if I focus on the situation between Bremen and Bremerhaven, the port of Bremerhaven. So the distance between the dry port in Bremen, the freight village in Bremen, how we call it, and the seaport in Bremerhaven, the distance is more or less 80 to 90 kilometers. And why not to realize this distance and the operations on a self-controlled way? So as soon as the ship arrives in the port, the ship decides about the best quay crane, and then the ship will organize the transshipment of the container and the operation of the quay crane, and then the containers will find their way on the container yard by themselves, by object-to-object communication, by object-to-object the decision. So the decision is done by the containers and no more by the terminal. And finally, the containers will be picked up by the trucks on a self-controlled way. So the truck communicates with the container, whether this container is assigned to this truck. And then the container and the truck made their own decision. And the truck finally goes via the gate and via gate drive-through concept without stopping on the highway, and then drive on the highway self-controlled, automated, without any driver to the dry port in Bremen. And in the dry port in Bremen, then the containers will be controlled and will be shifted to the automated high-rack storages. So all of these processes from the ship via the container yard, via the truck, on the highway, up to the freight village, up to the dry port, can be realized by object-to-object communication and via the cloud logistics on demand without any decision of dispatchers in the companies. Maybe it will be supervised and monitored by some people, but the decisions can be realized by the objects themselves. Maybe in 10 or 15 years. Nobody knows what happens in future. But I think the technology is available. It's a question on whether or not it will be realized or not. And it's a question on how much digitalization we want and we want to be realized. Because finally, it's not a question about the use of blockchain. Everybody is discussing about blockchain, so it's a kind of hype. It's not a question of trade lands, finally, or on the activities of Costco and Alibaba. In future, it's the question, who is the owner of the processes of tomorrow? Who has the data power? Who can control the digital business models? And hopefully it's not only one company. Hopefully it's not only Maersk. Hopefully it's not only Costco. Hopefully it's not only Alibaba or Amazon who controls all of these data flows and processes, because then we have some kind of a monopolic situation. And this is not very good for a competitive situation and for economic solutions. But nobody knows. So who is the process owner of tomorrow in the ports? Is it still the port and terminal operator? Or is it maybe the port authority? Is it the city administration? Is it the data provider? Is it the communication provider? Or is it the maritime cloud operator? I guess the world of the ports will change in future, maybe within the next 10 years, and we will see what will happen. And due to this, I summarize once more what I already have said in the beginning. My main messages: number one, digital transformation affects everyone. It is time to act. Second, thinking about bigger changes and questioning the everyday. Number three, observe monopoly tendencies critically. And four, promote cooperative cooperation also between competitors in regions through a common digital strategy, learn from each other and make projects visible. Thank you very much for listening. And I guess now we still have some minutes for discussions.
Thank you very much, Professor Haasis, for your detailed presentation. It's very informative, and I hope most of the delegates as well as the participants got a lot of input from you, especially from Bremerhaven as well as from all around the world. So now we can take few questions from the audience. So if there are anything, you can raise your hand, then I can allow you to ask questions from the audience. So until they are ready with the questions, I have one question, Professor Haasis. Now, since especially you are working with many different parts of the world, especially starting from Europe up to the Central Asia and then to even Southeast Asia and Asia. Now, how do you think that the digital transformation will be absorbed by each of these regions and different cultures, etc.? So is it a challenge or how it should be overcome?
This is really a very good question, yeah, because I think we still have a big digital gap between different countries. Maybe not so much in Asia, but if you focus on South America or on Africa, so there we still have a big digital divide, digital gap on how to implement all of these ideas of digital transformation. Nevertheless, I think digital transformation cannot be stopped, and it's a question on time on how to implement these technologies also in developing countries. Due to the activity of or due to the vision of China on implementing the One Belt, One Road strategy between China and Europe, between China and the rest of the world, I think this could push a little bit the idea of implementing not only a physical flow of cargo containers, but also the flow of information and of data. And due to this, I'm optimistic that we will come to a very efficient and digital information flow along the whole transportation chain, from at least from Asia to Europe. But there's still a long way, because the people have to learn on how to realize it. The people have to learn about the consequences. The people have to be educated in the focus on digital transformation. So the young students have to learn what will happen with digital transformation, or what could happen with digital transformation, and on how to realize it. And also inside the companies, the whole processes of digital transformation have to be done not only top down as a decision of the big boss, but in cooperation with the people working inside the companies. So we are still in the beginning of this digital transformation, but I think time is running, and it's time to react and to provide some solutions to the companies.
Thank you very much for very detailed explanation. Since you are especially working on these cultural differences in supply chain and logistics, I think you are the best to answer this type of question. That's why I pose it.
I think it's very interesting for Sri Lanka, because Colombo is one of the major ports on the way from China to Europe, or from Europe to China. And due to this, it's a question on how to take part in these developments. But I think if you try to educate your students in the field of digital economy, in the field of platform economy, in the field of digital transformation and digital processes, I think you are on the right way towards the future.
Okay, thank you very much for your ideas. Actually, we are always trying to promote the digitalization in entire supply chain. So even CLT basically promoting this digitalization, especially for the benefit of the entire stakeholders of the supply chains at the moment. So we in our programs also try to adapt especially Industry 4.0 related aspects on logistics and supply chain. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience? We can take one more. Okay, if nobody is having any question, I have one more. Hope it's fine with you. That's about this how to approach this multi-stakeholder environment when we are especially trying to go for a change, or especially digitalization is a kind of a drastical change where everybody should cooperate in the same level. Otherwise, it won't deliver the expected benefits. So how you think that different stakeholders should bring into one platform to adopt these things? Who should drive this one? Is it the authorities or the private companies or shipping lines or terminal operators? Who should be the leaders for this?
It's also a really very good question. At present, in my opinion, it's mainly driven by Maersk, and it's mainly driven by COSCO and these activities. But on the other way, at least in Europe, all the major ports are also engaged in these kind of communications with all the stakeholders of maritime economics, maritime logistics, and port management in the different regions. In Germany, it's mainly driven by the ports and by the ports people, and also by the ministry. And I think the same is in, I know the same is in Antwerp and in Rotterdam. So I'm not sure how it works in the different countries of Asia, but at least in Germany, it's mainly driven by the ports themselves, by the big shipping companies, and by the ministries who give some support for these developments.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Haasis. Since we are running out of time, I would like to conclude this session, and we can move on to the next keynote. So again, I would like to thank Professor Haasis for your very detailed explanations on the questions, as well as the detailed keynote, which is very much timely for the conference, as well as